Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Sabaton, The War to End All Wars, out March 4th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 11 tracks, 45 minutes in length, and this is the band's 10th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish power metal band. As far as the design goes, the record has a great start and a great finish. It's just missing the middle. The album starts off with Sarajevo, it finishes with Versailles, really the two songs that give you a sense of beginning and end, because that's where the war started and that's where the war ended. They use the narrator, so these tracks feel more like intros and outros, not necessarily standalone songs. They have the narrator coming in, telling you step by step all the things that happened leading up to World War I getting started. And then you have the same feel, the same design coming back again in the outro in Versailles, giving you all the necessary steps as the war came to a crumbling end. So I like this style, I like this bookend approach. It helps the overall concept of the album, but I feel like they could have gone a little bit deeper. If you're gonna have a record that has this kind of start with a narrator, with an intro track, like a combo, a hybrid, and then do the same thing as the outro, having something in the middle that gives you an idea of where you are within the war would allow these two songs to have a much higher impact on the overall experience of listening to this record. It would allow you to go deeper into the concept, go deeper into the war. I know the songs that are built within the record offer you different stories of things that happened throughout World War I. But if you're going to have a starting point and you're going to have an end point, it would be really important to have also something that kind of guides you throughout the record, that gives you a sense of continuity, even though the songs themselves don't necessarily connect with that continuity. Even outside of an interlude in the middle of the record, having maybe one or two other songs with the same narrator that just gives you a glimpse of where you are within the fog of war, it would make this album feel even more connected, more impactful. It would enhance the overall concept of the album without having to necessarily tie all the songs together or give them a chronological sequence. It would just make the record more robust, and it would feel like these two tracks at the beginning, at the end, would have more of a purpose to serve the overall design of the album. Now, within those two tracks, the record has a lot of mobility. Nothing new for Sabaton. They do a wonderful job alternating styles, putting songs that have a slower tempo right next to songs that have a much higher tempo, leg pounding tracks designed to really boost the experience and designed to enhance the melodic approach of tracks that came before and tracks that come after. So the ebbs and flows, the dynamic roller coaster ride approach that we always normally see on Sabaton records, is definitely alive and well throughout the entire design of this album. So outside of those two bookends, opening and outro, you really have an album that has all the Sabaton attributes in terms of the movement, in terms of the life, in terms of the energy that it gives. As far as the sound goes, this record is a Sabaton record, so it's not like they're reinventing the wheel or creating something that we haven't seen before. If I had to pick one element that sounds slightly different from previous records, or at least has a more predominant role on this specific album, is the use of synths and keyboards. This record definitely has more of that a notion of how you create melody in a different way, permeating throughout the entire album. Now, not every song is going to depend heavily on those keyboards, but they're there sung in and sung out. They just have different roles to play depending on where you are within the album, depending on where you are from song to song, in terms of how melodic they need to be, in terms of how soft they need to be, or in terms of how driven the songs are. But they have a clear impact on how you're going to perceive this album. They give the record almost a more popish feel, but at the same time a little bit more of an epic soundtrack, movie score style approach. And I really feel like that's where they went with this album. This is an album that sound-wise doesn't have as many leg-pounding songs as previous records, but it does have more of a cinematic approach. It's more about the atmosphere that they're trying to create with these songs, how that atmosphere is impacted by the sound, how it spreads, how it becomes bigger, almost larger than life. And when you do something like that, you tend to lose something else. And maybe on this record, what they lost was a little bit of power, a little bit of drive, at least more on a consistent basis. It's still going to be there. You're still going to have a few leg-pounding songs throughout the entire record, but it's not going to be as consistent from that specific approach. It's definitely a more mellow, it's definitely a more epic sounding movie score style record. Now, within that sound, two elements jump into the forefront, as they always do on Sabaton records: the drums and the guitars. I really like the drums on this album. I like the sound of the drums. I like the tonality that the drums have. I like the heartbeat that they give to the overall record. When the songs have that fast movement to them, they sound heavy, they're powerful, they're pushing or helping propel the songs forward. And the tracks that are a little bit more melodic, that have that more movie score style approach, they have more of a soul and a heartbeat, and they have that direct impact into how you're going to perceive the soundscape on those specific tracks. So I really like the nuances that the drums give. Not a one-size-fits-all approach, definitely very dynamic from start to finish. The same thing could be said for the guitars. The guitars are still going to be the major drivers of this record, as they are on any Sabaton album. I like the tonality of the guitars, I like the duality of the guitars. I just feel at times they didn't drive as fast, or they didn't have as much energy as I was expecting them to have on a more consistent basis. But that goes back to that overall movie score soundtrack approach. You gotta give something in order to get something else. It's really hard to allow these two worlds to coexist with one another. But the guitar playing is still outstanding throughout the entire record. I really enjoy the solos all around. There's not a lot of solos that you feel like stand out in the crowd, but there's definitely a few throughout this record that have a very specific place, not just within the songs, but within the context of the overall guitar performance of this album. So I like the guitar playing. I didn't feel like it was as impactful as I was hoping it to be, but it still drove the message home song in and song out. Now vocally, it's Joaquin behind the mic, so you're going to get a consistent performance from start to finish. He has his range, he has the corner of the world that he really likes to live in and that he excels in, and he's going to be exactly there throughout the duration of this record. I don't really feel like this is an album that he tried to go somewhere else. Not that he needed to, but it's a record that he stayed very comfortable in the pocket, and he just performed to the level that we've come to expect from him. He has that tonality that it's so Sabatonian that really drives home the lyrical content, the message of the songs, the history, the stories that he's trying to tell you. Now, on the other side of the vocals, something that they used throughout this entire record quite a bit was backing vocals and choirs. I liked it a lot on this album, perhaps more than in previous records, because if you look at the soundscape, if you look at that movie score, epic soundtrack style approach that this record really has, having those sort of backing vocals, choirs, really helps with that. It allows the vocals to feel bigger, to fill in all the space, and have the same sort of vibe that the sound behind them is carrying. So it didn't feel out of place. It actually felt really well. It made the songs feel more comfortable, more complete, more balanced all around. So I like the use of it, even though it's going to get used throughout the entire record quite a bit. But once again, it matches the soundscape, it matches the overall the construction and design and delivery that this record holds. Now, overall, is this their best album to date? No. Is this their worst album to date? No. This is a good Sabaton record. It sounds slightly different from its predecessors. Like I said, it has that more epic vibe to it, more of a movie score approach, and it loses a little bit of the heaviness that I was expecting this album to have. It's still there, not as noticeable. It's a more melodic, a more easier to digest record with a lot more modern power metal elements at play. So this is a record that is going to be one of those albums that in the future you're going to be able to take a few songs out of it, and those songs are going to become memorable Sabaton tracks. But as a whole, this album was not as consistent, was not as memorable as its predecessor. It's a good record, it's a quality album, it offers new perspectives as far as the band is concerned, but in my opinion it fell a little bit short of the mark. It doesn't have that aroma that you feel when you listen to a Sabaton album that just really carries forward and it stays with you for a very long time. Like I said, there's a few memorable tracks on this record, but overall the record doesn't have that sort of punch, doesn't have that sort of power that really permeates and stays with you for a very long time. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Stormtroopers. This is the second song on the album, but technically the first song, because the one before it is Sarajevo, and that's more of an intro than an actual real track, if you will. This is a great track. It's high octane, leg pounding, the perfect way to get the album started, because if you want to get the fans going, if you want to get the fans engaged with a record, listening to this album and feeling like they're listening to a Sabaton record, this is the best song to start off the album. Really, when you look at all 11 tracks, outside of Sarajevo, if you're going to put a song that comes right after, you need a song that has these characteristics. Pedal to the metal, high octane, high power, very driven, thunderous drums, The guitars driving the song, the vocals really capturing your attention. You feel magnetized by them. You feel that they're carrying you through the entire track. The chorus is very typical in terms of being super hooky, super catchy. All the Sabaton DNA is sprinkled throughout this entire track in terms of the sound, the execution, overall construction. A song that has a lot of power, and it has an incredible solo section. Now it simmers a little bit, it leads you into that solo section with a lot of strength, so the solo feels even more explosive. That portion of the song feels even more powerful. A track that's an absolute banger. I really feel like this must be on their set list going forward, because it has all of those Sabatonian elements that we've come to love. Next you have Hellfighters. I picked this song as much about the sound and the tonality of the track as the story behind it. I love the story of this song, and it's a story that I was familiar with, and I wanted to see if this track was going to do that story justice. In my opinion, it does. It's a song that has a great guitar sound. It feels a little bit thicker, a little bit grittier, a little bit dirtier. It's a song that is not as melodic. It doesn't have as much of that hookiness and catchiness of melody that permeates throughout the track. It's a song that's a little bit more down and dirty in the mud. It reflects well the experience that those soldiers went through, that are represented in the lyrical content in the title of the song itself. So I really like this track. I like the movement that it has. It still has some melodic undertones, but I really undertones. They don't jump to the forefront. They stay a little bit in the background in order to give the song a little bit more texture, to make the song have a little bit more substance. But it's all about the grittiness. It's all about the thickness. Really, that grit that these soldiers had is perfectly represented in the guitar sound and the overall song construction. Last but not least, Lady of the Dark. A slower, catchier, almost poppier song. It still has some bite on the guitars, but not a lot. The track moves a lot slower. It's more about the melody. It's more about keeping the track contained. It's more about you enjoying the vocal dynamics that the track has, because they used some choir, some backing vocals in order to give the song bigger volume, bigger presence, allowing the track to have a lot of energy without necessarily being energetic. That's the kind of style of track you have here. The story behind the song is really interesting, and that allowed the song to feel even better in terms of how it was put together, in terms of how it was delivered. This is it, Sabaton, The War to End All Wars, out March 4th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.